Thanks for joining me in this three-part video series on piano technique, and this is of course the first video. And what I want to do in this video is just go over some of the concepts that we're going to talk about in this video and in the next two, and then actually I want to tell you just a little bit about myself, and we'll also start talking about one of the first main areas of piano technique, which is actually proper posture and proper use of the body. So before I do that, let me give you just a brief overview of what you can expect in the next couple lessons. I've tried to take all the things we're going to talk about and narrow them into 5 general categories or 5 areas of study. And so the first area of study is posture and how you use your body and hand position. And then the second area of study is muscle groups and movements, learning how to individuate the different muscle groups and what movements to use in piano technique. And then slightly related to that is the third area, which is when to relax and when to support. A lot of people never learn when it's appropriate to support, such as with hand position, and when it's appropriate or important to think about relaxation, such as when we use the shoulders and things like that. And then the fourth area is one of my favorite areas. It's hidden movements. This idea that in piano technique, there are actually movements that you don't see, especially sometimes in quick playing, that really play a big part in whether you have a successful piano technique. So we'll talk about the use of fingers 3, 4, and 5, which is something that very commonly pianists come and have trouble with me, and even very advanced pianists have trouble especially using the 4th finger. And so we'll talk about how you can use hidden movements to operate with those fingers and in passage work and things like 5-finger patterns. And then in the 5th area, we'll talk about how you can use multiple movements or how you can integrate movements together. This is a very, very powerful thing to understand, because once you start to develop a vocabulary and really explore some of your own movement patterns, learning how to put those movements together can really strengthen your technique. So that's what's going to come up in the next couple of videos. But before we get into all that, if you give me just a couple minutes, I want to tell you about myself, because some of you are familiar with my work, or maybe you've done a lot of reading of Piano Blog, but some of you might be new to me, and so I want to give you a sense of who I am. So I'm actually a piano teacher of now about 20 years, which is quite a while, I suppose, and I've been teaching since I was a teenager. My first piano student was actually a really, really nice older man named Scotty, and I still have kind of fond memories of that. He would pull up to my lessons or to my house in a pickup truck, and he was very, very kind, which was kind of a good thing, because at the age of, I think I was 15, I really did not have any idea what I was doing. I was a fairly advanced pianist for my age, but I was definitely new to teaching, and luckily he was very patient, so it kind of all worked out in the end. And ever since then, I've just really developed a passion for teaching. I've taught hundreds of students. I've taught thousands and thousands of hours, and across all that time, I've been involved with some really exciting projects. I've opened a music school here in Austin, Texas, where I work with a team of other teachers. I've run a piano festival here, and of course I've done my undergrad and my grad work and all sorts of stuff. I've been lucky enough to perform a lot, and super lucky to study with some of the best piano teachers alive. And so I have a lot of gratitude for all the things I've been allowed to do. And through teaching, I've been able to pass on a lot of what I've learned, and really able to kind of work with everybody, no matter what their age or their skill level, and learn a lot from that as well. I found that through teaching, through working with students for thousands of hours, I've actually had to do a lot of thinking about piano technique, because it's one thing to be able to do something, but it's another thing to take someone and try and explain that to them, and that's a whole nother skill set. And so I think after those thousands of hours and through that, you've started to get an understanding that there are commonalities among people with what makes for a good technique, and you start to get a sense of sort of some of these hidden things that really aren't obvious. Even if you're a very, very skilled advanced pianists, there are certain elements of technique that you really don't notice until you've worked with quite a number of people and really seen what works and what doesn't work. And so it gives me a lot of pleasure to pass that sort of thing on to my students in videos like this. So that's just a little bit about me, and I hope it kind of fills you in. I want to start in this first lesson talking just about hand position and posture. And there are, like I said, there's 4 other areas that we'll talk about, and we'll get to those in the next 2 videos. So I'm going to send you a video tomorrow and then a video the following day. So you'll want to watch out for those in your email. But in this lesson, I'm just going to talk about posture and hand position. And actually, if you can, no matter what your level, even if you're very advanced or if you're just starting out, if you can start thinking about posture and hand position, you'll be amazed at how that redounds into your piano technique. I found that it's probably the #1 thing that gives people trouble, because if they don't have their posture correct, it just has a lot of implications for how they're using their body and their muscle groups. So I'm going to give you some pointers, some basic pointers about posture. And while this might seem easy and obvious to some of you, you do really well to videotape yourself playing or take a picture of yourself from the side, sort of how I have the camera set up for this video, but maybe a little bit lower. I had to get an angle where you could see me and take a look at my posture. But take a picture of yourself from the side and see if what you're doing generally lines up with what I'm talking about here. You might be very surprised that there are some habits you have either from practicing the piano or from other activities that are detrimental. So let's get into it. And I'm gonna go ahead and start by talking about the bench height and the distance. So hopefully you can see a little bit my height and distance from the piano and my relation to the keyboard. So when we sit at the piano, you want to sit just like you were always told is proper. You want to have your shoulders relaxed, so not up to your ears like this, but just relaxed. And you want to sit up nice and straight so that there's a line going through the midline of your head down through the midline of your torso. Now, when you're sitting up straight, one thing that people don't realize is that the part of your spine that you feel, this kind of pointy part coming out of your back, is actually not the load-bearing portion of the spine. The load-bearing portion of the spine actually goes through more the middle of the torso. So when you think about sitting up straight, think about that line going through the middle of your torso and not through the back, the portion of the spine that people think of as the spine. A lot of times, if your mental image is that sitting up straight is to be aligned with the pointy back part of the spine, you'll start to sit a little bit like this. And I always think of this as sort of the posture people take if they're sort of hugging someone they don't really like, you see? But you really don't want to sit like this at the piano, because it puts a tremendous amount of strain on these muscles and it doesn't support your shoulder area. So what instead you want is to have more of this sturdy kind of a tree trunk approach to posture, where you're sitting up nice and straight and you've got that line going right through the middle. And some people don't realize whether they're sitting one way or not. So it's a really good idea to take a video or to get a mirror beside the piano so you can always kind of check out whether you've got that nice solid straight posture. Now, once you've kind of achieved this, you want to be sitting high enough at the piano so that when your hands are gently resting on the keys, the elbow is at or slightly above the key level. And I would say 9 times out of 10, people tend to sit a little too low at the piano. And partly this is just the fault of benches. Most benches are manufactured a little bit too low. And so I don't know if you can see from here, but I have these actually little boards I use here at the school where I'll raise someone up even just half an inch or so, because it can make a big difference. So make sure you're not below the keys, even just a little bit, but that you're at or above the keys. Because if you're below the keys, you're going to find that you start to generate tension in your shoulders without realizing it to kind of make playing more comfortable. Okay? And then also, when you're seated at the piano, you want to make sure that you're far enough back that your elbows are just a little bit in front of the torso, just a little bit, but not so far back that you're stretched out like this. So I've heard this called Tyrannosaurus Rex position, where you're playing like this, you know, your elbows are back here, and then I sometimes call this the race car driver position or sleepwalking position. And you don't want either of those. You actually want in the middle, a nice middle ground, where you're just relaxed here, but you're not so close into the piano that you feel cramped up. So more often than not, when someone comes into a lesson, if they haven't studied with me and been picked on by me, what I see is they'll come up to the bench and they'll scoot it into the piano like they would if they were working at, say, a computer keyboard, and this is a big mistake. So I always will then, of course, scoot the bench back. In fact, if you can see, I actually have the bench so far back that I'm sitting on the front half of the bench. And so this is another mistake people make, is they'll feel that they have to kind of lean back like this and have their whole body over the bench. But this tends to make you want to collapse these core muscles, whereas sitting more towards the front of the bench will tend towards kind of allowing for more of a supported core like this and a nice posture. So you're far enough back that your elbows are a little in front of your torso, and then you're far enough up so that when you place your hand at the keyboard, your elbow is at or slightly above this surface level of the white keys here. And you generally want to sit so that the middle of your torso is going through middle C here. And that, although it's not the exact division of the keyboard, it's just a kind of a good rule of thumb to get you seated in the middle. And then you can kind of lean down or lean up as you need to, if you're going to play something low or play something, you know, up high like this. The other thing I wanted to talk about or touch on, other than posture, is hand position. Hand position is something that's really misunderstood because there's a tradition of telling students to curve their hands. And a lot of method books will say you have to curve your fingers. Now, this comes from a good place, because there is something that I'll talk about in future videos, which is that you want a supported hand arch. But you'll notice that a supported hand arch, where none of these knuckles is what we call collapsed, is different than the way piano is often taught, which is to kind of almost clench the hand and have this very rounded hand. And those are two separate issues. So what I like to do with students when they're first thinking about hand position is I'll actually have them stand up like this and let their hand hang naturally at the side. And what happens when you let your hand hang at your side like this is you'll naturally go into this beautiful hand arch. This is just the natural resting point of the hand. And you want to inculcate this as neutral, so that when you're seated like like this at the piano, and then you just kind of gently rest your hands at the keys, you have this beautiful natural hand arch. Now, this comes with a lot of caveats, because it really depends on context. There's sometimes when you do want a lot of curl, you know, if you're doing something that has a lot of you know, maybe a sharp staccato sound to it, or something like that, there might be a time for this very curled hand position, you know. But you can see even in that little Bach type passage where I'm doing a lot of staccatos, there's still not a real curve to the hand. I'm able to get a really crisp, clean sound from that without, you know, clenching the hands like this. And then there are other times where you might want a more flat type of finger, you know, in a lot of, say, Chopin legato playing, a lot of people find that a slightly flatter finger lets them get a nice legato. So there's a lot of context to how you're using the hand and how curved it is. But as a baseline, as a resting point, I would start with this kind of natural hand position. So those are two things you can start to work on right away. And even if you've been playing for a while, and you're working on some pieces, even advanced pieces, go ahead and videotape yourself from the side and see what your posture looks like in general. Are you tense in the shoulders? Or are they relaxed? Are you sitting up nice and straight? Are you sitting like this? And then are you sitting too close or too far or too high or too low? And then also, you might also start to look out for, do you have an unnatural hand tension? Don't be surprised if you do, if you've taken traditional piano lessons, because a lot of times, unfortunately, this is what's taught. And so working on a more natural supported hand position without this sort of clenched tension is something that you might think about. So that's all for this lesson. I hope that you enjoyed it, and there are 2 more coming with lots more material, so you'll want to watch out for those. Again, one's going to be tomorrow in your email inbox, and then one's going to be the next day. So I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about me, and I'd love to learn a little bit about you. What I've done is I've put a comment section below this video. So on this page, go ahead and look for the comment section and tell me what has been your biggest stumbling block or problem or question with technique, and then also tell me what gets you most enthusiastic. What's your real motivation at the piano? Because I want to know from my readers and my viewers what gets you excited and what your questions are. And that just lets me help you quite a lot. It lets me really cater to what your needs and questions are. So please leave a comment and tell me about yourself below this video. I'd really, really love to hear from you. And those comments keep me going, because that's sort of my energy to make all these videos and all these blog posts. And so it means a lot more to me than you think. So please do comment below this video. And then I think also what I'm going to do, since I've been talking about posture and all of this for the entire video, is I'm going to dig up a video of one of my students playing. This is from a few years ago, but I want to go ahead and post it just so you can see what I think is a really good example of someone who has a supported, fluid posture. So you can watch that and watch how graceful this student's posture is. He's not clenched or locked, but he's also not slouched. And I think you're going to find that that just gives him a beautiful, full sound quality. So again, that's all for today. I hope you found this helpful, and watch out for future videos, and please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next lesson.